Hey everyone, it's Christ Plug here, and I'm sorry it took practically a whole day to get you this video, the relative versus the absolute, which was the initial video I was going to put last night, but it ended up not only being replaced, but being postponed. So here's the relative versus the absolute. And I just want to say that I have this video out because I think it's very important that us and members of Body of Christ have this relative versus absolute, not like versus like they're against each other, but the comparison between the relative and the absolute together. I think it's very important that we always do that. So regardless of that, here we go. Into this rabbit hole that's not really a rabbit hole, but just a whole long, drawn out explanation, which isn't really that long, but I digress. Let's just get into the shit. So, relative. Why we need the relative? Because right now, we're relatively suffering. We're relatively in mortal bodies that could break from the simplest of mistakes. You could break a leg, break a bone, hurt yourself accidentally. From the simplest of mistakes, it's funny how we can lift 100-pound dumbbells, 100-pound weights, 200-pound weights, but we bump our knee into a table and we're out of commission for a month. But it's funny, not haha funny, but it's funny more like ironic type funny. It's kind of like ain't that strange type shit. But excuse me, I don't know what's going on. But anyways, we are relatively can be broken, literally. I have a broken leg, broken bone. But absolutely, we'll get a better body. We'll get a body that cannot be broken. That cannot be beaten so easily. We'll have a more durable body. We may damn well be invincible to anything. We might. But yeah, we might be invisible when we get our immortal body. Invincible when we get our mortal bodies. And that aside, let me go into a list to make this a bit shorter. We relatively suffer. We absolutely will get joys. When we'll have joy. We relatively have debilitations. We absolutely will not have any restrictions or be bound to anything. We relatively have to deal with the world. We absolutely won't have to deal with shit almost. Almost to none. Almost said second to none. But that could apply as well. We relatively have to hold our anger in, which is unhealthy. Hold our sadness in, which is unhealthy. Hold our emotions in, which is unhealthy. But we absolutely won't be feeling too much of any negative emotions at all. Absolutely. We relatively go to war. We relatively are oppressed as far as being humans in the world, and specifically in certain parts of the world that are not really democracy based. We relatively have that. We absolutely will be under no oppression and that goes for any nation. But soon the nations when the new earth is done and here, not done and gone. Haha, not done and gone though. Done here. done and here at this very moment in time, which is not now but soon. As soon as that happens, we won't. Nobody will be under any oppression. Nobody will have to deal with not being able to have freedom of speech. Nobody have to. Nobody have to do with that. We relatively hate things. We absolutely won't have to hate anything, nor will we ever hate anything. Doesn't mean we won't disagree, maybe, but at least relatively, the disagreements are in violence, but don't have to be. But and also in the absolute, that will be abolished. There will be no violence against each other just over a disagreement. Relatively, we need to eat, we need to sleep, we need to drink water, we need to do all these things to keep ourselves alive. So we can prevent the inevitable death. But absolutely, we won't need to eat, drink, procreate. Absolutely. We won't need to do anything that would normally keep us from dying. And absolutely, especially absolutely, death will not ever be present. Absolutely. You see what I'm getting at here? Everything absolutely is the opposite of everything that's relative here. Anything that's absolute is the opposite of everything that's relative. Now, some relative things are good. Now, I want to think that relative things like material shit, video games, which I enjoy so much. Oh my god, I enjoy it too much. I enjoy music too much. Now, those things I don't think are relative or absolute. But as far as being absolute, I think that video games, music, might be absolute as well as relative. And here's why I think that can be both. So, you know how our relationships on Earth, right? Our relationships are not relative or absolute. How they function are relative and absolute. They are relative and function. They're relative and absolute ways that they function, but the relationships themselves are not absolute or relative. I'll make a video on this too, on things that are neither relative or absolute, and both relative and absolute. So, the same as our relationships, like our mothers, our fathers, our brothers, our sisters, our lovers, our best friends, our friends in general. That is relative and absolute. Both, neither, and everything in between. You want to know how? Absolutely, we're all bound to die. Not absolutely, I meant relatively. Absolutely, we're all not going to die, rather. That was a mistake I made accidentally. So, I'm correcting that right now. But absolutely, we will all not be dying. Whereas relatively, we're all pretty much going to die at some point in time. Whether it be by some quote-unquote freak accident, which God is operating according in the counsel of his own will. So if that happens, then God planned it for a reason. But if that happens, then when you get a body that's no longer bound to dying, whether by natural causes or by disasters, freak accidents, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, stab wounds, gunshots, explosions, being in war, being a civilian, casualties, whether any of that relatively, we have to deal with that. Absolutely, we won't. But there's a good thing. There's a good side to looking at both the absolute and relative. Now I explain to you what their absolute, and relative is, and a little bit of why we need to look at it. I'll go more in depth on why we need to look at it later. But just a little sample right now. So I'll see you all later. Grace and peace to y'all. Love y'all. Have a great day or night, wherever you are.